Hi, welcome, hello. This is the fourth episode of Behind the Alias, and I'm your host, Jim Buteau. Tonight's guest, a military man from the great state of Texas, home of the brave, where the bullets are cheap and the healthcare is debilitating. A good old smell of freedom.
Behind the Alias does not share the views of Jim Buteau and as such are legally exempt from revenge shootings and long-distance stand-your-ground defenses. Please direct all live rounds, grenades, lawsuits, and guttural screams at jimbuteau@commiecanadian.ca.
All jokes aside, Texas is experiencing the beginning of a cultural shift. Long known to outsiders as a bastion of Republican ideals and gunslinging cowboys, Texas has been a red state since the mid-70s. But as latest election showed, that may be about to change. Before you know it, Texans will still be the horse-riding, yee-hawing, gun-toting, property-protecting, oil-loving people they've always been, but with blue buttons on instead of red, that makes it considerably better, right? 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 Several high-profile companies from Silicon Valley have recently revealed plans to uproot and leave California for the green pastures of Texas. The most notable move comes from Tesla's head, Elon Musk. Musk made headlines in recent months by reopening the Fremont factory despite a county lockdown on non-essential services. Seemingly tired of overreaching regulations to the pandemic and not at all related to billions in potential capital tax savings, Elon Musk has done the billionaire equivalent of picking up his ball and going home. Although in his case, his ball is a multi-billion-dollar corporate headquarters, and his home is 1,000 miles away. We wish both the corporate billionaires of Silicon Valley and the state of Texas well in this new chapter. Hopefully, it goes better than Mr. Musk's latest Starship test flight. Before I move on and present this week's guest, please make sure to subscribe to the channel. We're still in the early days of this amazing show, and at this time, every subscription means a lot. Alright, enough of all that. Let's get to the reason we're here today. This week, on Behind the Alias, Joel Jimenez, an aspiring officer of the US Air Force, joins us to discuss how he went from ranch life to being a member of the United States military. We also chat about how gaming helped him define who he is today. On the What Happens Online segment, we react to the vlog of his very first LAN tournament. We'll then end the week with the Game Time segment, on which we play a very appropriate game called Mount Your Friends 3D. That's right, it's as inappropriate as it sounds. Check out the schedule in the description below, and follow us on Instagram and Facebook as we release segment teasers prior to segment releases. Without further ado, let's get started! Hi, welcome, hello. Welcome to this fourth episode of Behind the Alias. I'm Jim Buteau, your host. Today on the show, Joel Jimenez Alias Jimmy joins us to talk about what he does. What's going on, Jimmy?
Hey, what's up, man? Thanks for having me.
So what's your goal? What would you plan on achieving as an airman in the Army?
That's a good question. So, coming out of high school, we're all trying to figure out what we want to do in life, and figure out what life is all about, right? So we go through our own experiences and stuff like that. I grew up here, was born and raised in Texas, and worked on a ranch the majority of my life. And at that point, I learned how to work, right? And it was a pretty hardcore lifestyle. Like you wake up, if school started at 6 a.m., you're going to wake up at 5, before you even go to school to go flip some hay bales, go feed horses and stuff like that. So it was a lot of work, and that's all I knew. And it taught me a lot of life lessons, right? Work ethic, never walk past a problem, do things right the first time, right? These things were kind of instilled in my brain. So as I was going through school, like I did struggle. I struggled a lot, and it got to the point where I figured out what I wanted to do after high school. And I didn't enjoy the education system here in Texas, or just high school in general. When I was coming towards graduation, barely crossed the finish line. I was literally crawling with my bloody knees to to the finish line to finish high school. I decided, I learned about, like, I saw military advertisement, right, and to make it look super cool. Watch YouTube videos. I'm like, dude, 100%. I would love to join the military. That's exactly what I'm looking for. And you go through a whole recruitment process, right? Here in the United States, especially Texas, they got little recruitment, squares in every town. Like, it's almost like a McDonald's, right? Like, you see Air Force recruiting or Marines, Army. So I walked in, and you got to take a whole bunch of tests to get in. Definitely struggled passing all that stuff. Ended up passing it all slowly but surely. It took months, because I was, clearly a freaking potato at the time. And yeah, so I joined the Air Force. Throughout my time in the Air Force, I didn't really get the job I specifically wanted, but I learned a lot about myself and my capabilities. So as I was going through, I realized, like, this is the exact lifestyle that I love. I love the camaraderie. I love, like, their mission focus. I love everything they do. I love traveling. You meet people all across the world, different walks of life, different cultures. And I feel like a lot of people lack that in their life to understand.
And that's what you knew already, right? Growing up, and that's the same
Yeah,
kind of lifestyle. So that wasn't a change from what you grew up in.
exactly. Yeah. So growing up in that lifestyle, like, yeah, I knew I needed to put in work. It's effort and attitude. Those are the two biggest things that you need in everything you do in life. So for sure, coming from, as a ranch hand all the way to the military, I was definitely prospering in the military environment,
So
and
why Air Force?
so primarily I was trying to do the Marines at first, but my father was in the Marines, and my older brother, he ended up joining the Air Force. So that time, I'm the youngest son, and I was living with my mom. We're in a duplex here in Texas, and I was basically the last little birdie out of the nest. And as we both, it was just me and my mom at the duplex. So we grew really close. So, and she's like, I don't want you joining the Marines. I don't want you to go out there and just be a piece of meat and go die or something like that, right? Like, that's just the perspective of people, especially their perspective of the military. So, I talked to my dad, about the Marines and his experience. He's like, well, it's going to be a lot of work. When my dad's straight from Mexico, and when he talked about joining the Marines, what he literally thought the Marines is like, you hop onto a helicopter, right? You go to boot camp, you hop on a helicopter, they're going to drop you off in a jungle somewhere, right? And you have to just survive. If you survive for X amount of months, you're going to be a freaking, United States Marine or something, right? So that's literally what he thought it was. So he barely knew English. Going through boot camp, he's like, yes, sir, no problem, my friend, whatever, right? So he struggled a lot just due to the language barrier, but he just talked about, like, it wasn't really worth it overall. And when my brother joined the Air Force, he's like, dude, we get 5-star hotels, we got more money, they care about technology and education more, and you have a lot more free time. You're not just a grunt. So it convinced me. My mom convinced me too. So I ended up joining the Air Force, and I'm glad I did. So I did 6 years in the Air Force, and after that, like, I worked with the Army. I was on Navy bases during deployments and worked with Marines. And 100%, I'm so glad I joined the Air Force.
So it runs in the family, right? Has your father been deployed anywhere? Has he had to go through anything?
So definitely. So my dad, he was in the Marines for 10 years, 11 years. He got medically disqualified. He has some pretty jacked up toes. So they ended up, like, chopping all of his toes off and putting little rods in them, and trying to align them up. He had these, what they call hammer toes. So he had a lot of feet problems, and which kind of, like, I got some of those genetics too myself, but it's never been an issue. But so he ended up getting medically disqualified. Came back to Texas, and they're working at, like, some auto shop, right? Pretty typical Hispanic thing here in Texas. Open up a taco stand, or flip some cars on a junkyard. So that's what was going on there. And yeah, so after that, he did deploy. I don't know really where specifically. Like, it seems like a lot of the older generation doesn't really, like, talk about things, but I know he had a best friend in San Diego, California. But this best friend of my dad's ended up, from that deployment, I think, where the porta potties that have these little pooper cans, you pull the tray out where all the shit goes in, basically. and you have to burn it with diesel fuel, and you stir it. So I don't know if y'all seen Jarhead or not, but that's basically exactly what they did. And you inhale that, but there's a lot of chemicals. So my dad's best friend ending up getting lung cancer, and he died in like 3 months. Yeah, so it destroyed my dad 100%, and my dad just kind of like became a little isolated. But so overall, I mean, it's no joke, and
Well,
that's what my mom.
actually, no, I was just for fun, just preparing for the interview. I was browsing through the Reddit channel, just slash army, right? It's actually pretty depressing. uh,
Yeah, Reddit's not the ideal place to go to view what the U.S. military is like or whatever, because they're going to be like, "Oh my God, MREs suck. Meals refusing to exit," or like, "Yeah, dude, you ever been fucked before? Because I've been fucked too." And then they show like I joined the military or whatever, right? So there's a lot of memes about it, and it's just like for sure it's a lot of work. And
It's definitely not a reference, and I know there's a lot of people that meme around. But I saw actually you were just talking about like getting hit hard and stuff like that. I saw a lot of posts about depression. It's not a joke being in the military, right? So it's a lot of work, and it can take a toll on a man. If you had to deal with any share of mental illness, not personally, but maybe known someone that had to deal with. I know. So we always see like army people being like thick skinned, and they don't show their emotions and all of that. But at the end of the day, they're just like any other humans, right? They have emotions, and you think that in 2020 this might be something that transpires a little bit more than it used to in the stereotypes.
yeah, that's absolutely correct. So I mean, you think about our current generation, right, and the fact that like we're a lot more open to our emotions and like having different likes and dislikes and opinions. Okay, like we're a lot more open, a lot more freedom of speech, even compared to back in the day. So 100%, the military has always been really hardcore on certain situations, right? Like don't ask, don't tell for like the gay community, whatever it may be. But it's also like emotions, right? And so the Marines and Army have it the worst. They expect you to like, hey, you need to freaking suck it up, all right? When you're over there crying, your team's dying. Like that's the kind of mindset they have. Primarily, it's separation, family separation. Every time you deploy, you're separated, right? For 6 months for the Air Force, and for the Army Marines, is up to it's typically a year long. A year long, you're in some freaking sandbox. You start to become stone cold because if you sit there and try to dwell about it for too long, you fail to do your job effectively, right? And your team relies on you, and that kind of gets burnt into your brain. It's not about you yourself, it's about your team, it's about the mission. So what happens primarily, the most PTSD, it's not even PTSD, is definitely a bad subject, but primarily the mental health issue is when people leave the military, right? Because that gets burnt into your brain that the team, it's not about yourself, right? It's about your team. You need to take care of your team. You need to take care of the person on your left and right. It's the mission first. So when you become a civilian, it's not like that, right? Like no one really fucking cares, dude. They'll show up to work, they're like, "Damn, I'm doing fucking bare minimum, dude. I'm flipping fucking quarter pounders over here, homie. I don't give a shit. I'm late, dude. Fuck it." And it's just like, of course, us like military folks are walking to the job. I'm like, what the fuck's? There's no structure around here, dude. Like, you gonna let this fucking little scrub do this? Like, are you serious, dude? What's going on, man? And it gets to a point where you start to get depressed, because you miss the mission, you miss the team, and it's something that you can't explain. It's something that you can't, recreate. You just have to experience it. You have to be there yourself. That's it. It's as simple as that.
You kind of lose that sense of purpose, I guess, at some point.
100%.
With I mean, we're talking about the bad, and it's not only doing only bad. There's some people that actually found their way through military. Do you have any example of someone that's been such a good leader or an inspiration to other people and basically help them out, kind of find their way in life?
I was an administrative assistant, just working with pilots. So I was an enlisted member working with officers, which is pretty rare. And I ended up really prospering in that job, and I was picking officers' brains every day. And these are like the top of the top. You look at any Air Force, like 4-star general, chief of staffs, the people who lead the Air Force or work with the president, they start off as pilots primarily. Like that's the career field. So I was working with these individuals, those future leaders. And every day they motivated me, everyone around them, they're very humble. I'm like, in the general public, I'm like, what does it take to be a pilot? They're officers, so you need a bachelor's degree of some type. And then they're pilots and they're fighter pilots. I'm like, they must have like freaking PhDs. They got to be freaking geniuses, gods, because they're also so very motivating and chill. And so, yeah, so a lot of those individuals I worked with inspired me. They're like, yo, dude, you need, you're crushing this stuff, man. You should try this. I'm like, okay, I'll try this, and you should push it in the gym, or you should try this program out because it'll help you get a promotion, or dude, you should go join the Air Force Academy and become an officer. And I was like, there's no way I can be an officer, dude. There's no fucking way. I barely made it through high school, dude. No way. But they always motivated me and showed me my worth, And sure enough, like I got to the point, I was like, well, they kept telling me this. I'm like, all right, man, I'm gonna give it a fucking shot. And then so now, like, I ended up, after 6 years, I left the military. All those great motivators, those leaders that inspired me. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to leave the military, go to college, and try out, ROTC, which is a Force Reserve Officer Training Corps. I'll find out this February if I do get a pilot slot. That's what I'm hoping for. So I think we're going to be pretty competitive. It is a pretty competitive spot. Like, you do have to be the best of the best. But we'll see what happens, Hopefully we do.
What do you think about getting deployed? Obviously, it's something that must have gone through your mind when you made that decision.
Yeah, it depends. It depends on. It definitely takes a certain type of individual, right? Like, I've been through 2 deployments myself, but I'm an administrative assistant. All right, I'm not an infantry member going outside the wire, slinging my M4 at some jihadis, right? Like, that's not what it is. Like, people think you're going to deploy and you're going to go die.
No, for sure not. No, of course not. Yeah.
Yeah. So like I said, like when we talk about the Air Force, you think about pilots, and that's typically what it is. But no, a deployment base is an entire base. So you have medical, finance, it's all these different sections. So me as an administrative assistant, I worked at an operations squadron. Before the pilots would go do a deployment mission, I made sure the paperwork's good to go. So yeah, so deployments for me as an administrative guy.
But moving forward, you're trying to be pilot, right?
Absolutely. So putting that perspective of being a pilot, depending on what aircraft you get, you may deploy more than less, but it is an acceptance, right? Like, I could be a fighter pilot potentially if I'm high speed, and I will deploy a lot. It's usually a rotation of every 2 years, and I'm putting warheads and foreheads, right?
I think the real question here today, the most important one, is: have you ever lost a gay chicken challenge?
I've actually never done one. I'm not the bash of the military branches, but the Navy does that a lot. And I've talked to a lot of Navy homies. They're like, and they're straight individuals, but they're like, hey, dude, I've never lost a gay chicken challenge. I'm like,
huh?
You're right, dude? Okay. Quit? Yeah, so I've never been in a gay chicken challenge, but I mean, shit. Not today.
Oh, that's funny.
That's funny.